There are so many things about landscape photography that I wish I knew earlier and also made me rethink my landscape photography. Here I have compiled the 7 I find to be the most important. Also, stay around to get 50% off on your next print or photography book. So one characteristic I've always had is that when a perceived authority says something, I've always tried to dismantle their arguments. I cannot help myself. However, over the years, I've actually found that to be quite beneficial as a photographer, because when we start out as beginner photographers, we learn a whole lot of do's and don'ts. What I have found is that a lot of that is way more of a gray scale than it is black and white, and no pun intended. The first thing I wish I knew earlier that also changed how I think landscape photography is how pragmatic you can actually be around landscape photography. It is actually often problem solving, so do what works. Be pragmatic. Don't get bogged down in rules or what your favorite photographer dictates to be the right or wrong approach to photography. Do what gets the job done. That is what pragmatism means, and that can be applied very broadly within landscape photography. And let me just mention a few examples. First off, tripods are great when there is a lack of light and you're forced to extend the shutter speed, or if you deliberately aim for a long exposure, but if there is plenty of light and you are not photographing at night, then absolutely just go handheld instead of being bogged down by a tripod. If you don't have a filter holder or you forget the step-up ring, just handhold the filter like I did with this photo. And if you're not able to get a certain photo in one frame, don't give up on the idea. Make 2 and blend them in post-processing. Utilize the tools available to you. Why use 6 or 7 prime lenses to get the perfect image quality when you can use a zoom lens instead? Yes, a prime lens can get you almost perfect image quality, but if the hassle of using those primes makes you miss the photo, decide not to go up a mountain, exposes your camera to dust each time you're changing lenses, and so on, isn't it just better to use a zoom lens that may lag a bit in image quality compared to the primes, but makes you get the photo? What we all sometimes need a little bit of a reminder of is that photography is a visual art form. If what you do to improve the photo cannot be seen in the final result, that's maybe a print or just an upload to Instagram, then it doesn't matter. If you cannot see if a photo has been taken on a tripod or not, if it doesn't matter in the scene where you're taking the photo, then it doesn't matter in the end if you're using a tripod or not. However, before we head on, make sure that you're subscribed to my newsletter if you want all the inside news from me to you, because it can get lost in all the social media. This is my direct line to you. If you already subscribed to my newsletter but don't receive it, make sure to teach your email inbox that it is not spam, or it may also end up in the promotional folder if you're using Gmail. It is in my newsletter that I announce all my workshops, exclusive deals, and I also use it to give you a notification about new video uploads. And when you sign up, you get the free light version of my landscape composition ebook. It is down in the description. And besides what the light version of landscape composition can offer, be sure to also get the full version if you want to learn even more about composition in landscape photography. It is super easy to read, minimal text, loads of examples to get to the point fast. So it is actually an ebook that you will get through and learn from instead of being drowned in text. Again, there are links to the newsletter and the ebook down in the description of the video. So the next thing that made me rethink my photography is that golden hours are overrated. Yes, golden hours look gorgeous, and there are several reasons why we landscape photographers prefer photographing during the golden hour. We learn as beginners that golden hour is best for landscape photography due to the golden soft light, and don't get me wrong, it is fantastic, and I love photographing when the light is like that. I get super excited. There's nothing wrong with that. However, over the years, I really come to enjoy the neutral light that you can get just outside of a golden hour. But especially for selling photos and prints, golden hour may not be so sought after. Here are my most sold prints from the past year. But as you can see, there is only one golden hour photo. There are plenty of morning photos with mist and atmosphere, but the golden colors are not particularly present. And there is a good reason for this, because not many of us live in a house or an apartment where a big orange photo on the wall fits particularly well. When I had to choose what to put on my walls, I really wanted to put one of my all-time favorite photos from Denmark. This one. It's quite unique. It's special in the sense that there are few places you can capture an inversion like this. I absolutely love the birds that helps add interest. It's a photo taken close to where I've grown up, so I have a very nostalgic feeling towards the photo, and it's basically the first time I've photographed such a strong inversion in Denmark. Lots of reasons why I want to print it and look at it again and again. Only issue is, it's just so bloody orange, and it doesn't fit well with the rest of my apartment. So I went with this one here instead. It's the same concept, but the colors are just so much more neutral. And this is also where black and white photography comes in, because that as fine art does not take so much attention away from the rest of the room and the furniture. So the next thing on the list that made me rethink my landscape photography, and also I wish I knew earlier, is that early spring actually isn't too shabby. When I started out as a landscape photographer, it was always autumn season and snowy winters that were the big seasons. And later I could also add summer to that list. But for years, I've actually really struggled with early spring and warm, wet winters. You know, the period where all the vegetation is dead and brown. However, over the past years, because I kind of forced myself out into it, as I've had to come up with YouTube videos, I've managed to actually come away with some of my favorite photos of all time in that season. What I learned was to either avoid the scenes where the vegetation is brown and dead, or wait for some interesting conditions like winter storms as in this example, or atmospheric mornings like these examples. A benefit of photographing around forests at this time of year is also that you can see the shapes of the trees better than when they're full of leaves. With relatively few means of action, you can get some absolutely gorgeous photos at this time of year. However, you won't get them if you're not going out. It is a little bit of a numbers game. The more you go out, the more great experiences you get, the more and better photos you also get. So really, just get out. And of course, a thing I wish I knew earlier was to just print your photos. I've become very passionate about getting my photos actually printed. Because as mentioned with the one here in the background, it makes me rethink how I do my landscape photography. There are many ways you can do this. You can get your own printer, but you can also get it done at a lab. The holiday season is also coming up, so via me and the link in the description, you can actually get 50% off on your next print or photography book from SAAL Digital. Besides it being super satisfying getting your own photos printed and seeing them in their final form, a photo book is also a great and tactile gift to either yourself or your loved ones. This here is my personal portfolio book from 2016 from SAAL's professional line with lay flat and glossy pages, which just looks so good. But you can also make photo books from holidays, your child's first year, weddings, or the like, and SAAL have several different kinds of photo books to choose from in different sizes and with different kinds of paper. I have also got some metal prints made in these floating frames that looks really good. SAAL also make regular prints in different sizes and on different kinds of paper. They have mugs, key rings, puzzles, and much more. It's really just about exploring the options. If you already have got the 50% off, there are usually other different sales and coupon codes to use via the easy-to-use design program. There are links down in the description of this video for both SAAL Digital in the US, the UK, and continental Europe, and I highly appreciate you using those links because it does show SAAL that I'm worth sponsoring, which in turn benefits you so you can get these free tutorial videos. So of course, thank you so much. One of the biggest changes to my photography over the years is to be more aware of the atmosphere. Now, one thing is to photograph beautiful red and golden clouds during the golden hour, but using the atmosphere to your benefit is one of the smartest moves for interesting photos. Here I'm not just talking about fog, but storms throwing all sorts of particles around like sand and dust or water spray, either along the ocean or at waterfalls. Storm clouds are amazing for making interest in the sky, that there's actually something to look at besides a blue sky or a bland white sky, not to mention storm light, which can create both very magical local dappled light, sunbeams, and help create depth in your photo with the atmospheric separation throughout the scene. And with storms and all the particles in the air, you can usually actually get pretty interesting photos during midday light like I got in Ireland here. However, obviously fog, mist and low clouds definitely are the strongest contesters for creating separation, mood and atmosphere in photos. Believe it or not, it actually weren't before 2019-2020 I started benefiting from including fog in my photos, and that definitely made my interest for photographing forests explode. So the next thing is an editing tip or trick or something you need to avoid that I learned luckily fairly early on, but it definitely made me rethink my photography. And that is to not overdo and overuse the clarity slider and the dehaze slider or go down the HDR road. The main reason is that you actually remove the benefit the atmosphere in your photos provide. Now sometimes dehazing a very atmospheric photo can be a great idea. However, if it's just a little bit of atmosphere and you start dehazing it, you will lose that separation throughout the scene. When I started out, I just could not stop myself from cranking up that clarity slider. The dehaze slider wasn't invented back then, but the clarity slider just made the photos look so dramatic and gritty and cool and out of this world. Maybe a bit too far out of this world. Not to mention the good old HDR edits where the shadow areas were brighter than the highlights. Yup, that was a thing. Now, to be fair, this kind of editing did get me into photography and learn editing and later dig into some proper edits that still does look romanticized and out of this world, but in a much more aesthetic way. And later again, I've moved closer to a realistic, still interesting and aesthetic style, but I do try to make the edits more believable, although the processing can still be rather complex. The point is to hold back on the effects so that you do not distract the viewer's eye from the main subject, the concept or the story of your photo. So if you want to learn how I edit my photos and want to save $45 on my big Photoshop for Landscape Photographers post-processing course, there is a link down in the description of the video. Here I take you through all my different editing techniques that I have not necessarily learned over the years, but the best techniques that I use to get my current photos. Everything from luminosity masking, focus stacking, removing distracting objects in the scene, basically cleaning up the scene, making it more simple and aesthetic. And I give you like 11 start to finish photos to work on with raw files. The course overall contains more than 30 videos, and I've just made new videos to update to the current version of Camera Raw, or in some cases for you, Lightroom. As mentioned, there's a link down in the description of the video. Be sure to apply the coupon code to get the $45 off. So the last thing that has changed for me over the years and has made quite a significant difference to how I approach landscape photography is to photograph from the top of mountains or hills. I am the first to admit that I generally did not enjoy standing on top of a hill or a mountain and photographing down on a landscape. That's because these kind of photos with a wide angle doesn't have any interest to break the horizon, and with a long lens they can easily end up feeling very flat because you either do not have any foreground interest or anything to separate the layers in the scene. And this of course means that those were the two factors I needed to work with. In case of the wide angle, I would today try and find some kind of tree on top of the hill which could be included and create interest, but I'd probably rather just go a bit down the hill and photograph up and make sure that there is something of interest on top of the hill to photograph. However, with the longer focal lengths, actually this also applies to wider lenses, but no matter if you photograph from the ground or with a drone from an elevated position, to get that depth and separation throughout the scene, it was exactly in this moment right here where it clicked in my brain and I realized just how big of a difference, again, low fog and atmosphere makes photographing from an elevated position. Even with a flat horizon, you're creating so much interest in the landscape that the flat line that it is doesn't really distract that much. Furthermore, in these conditions, you'll likely have fog quite far into the background, which washes out the horizon and makes it less visually demanding anyway. And if it is visually demanding, you can often just exclude it by photographing more down, or you can crop the photo afterwards. Be sure to benefit from the 50% off from SAAL Digital. Sign up to my newsletter to get notifications on new videos, announcement on new workshops, exclusive offers, and if you want to learn even more about composition, be sure to get my 2 ebooks on exactly that. topic. There are links to everything down in the description of the video. See you next time.